Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 7 of A World Journey, Crossroads of Civilization by the Imperator of AMORC. An article taken from Rosicrucian Digest, Volume 32, Number 7, July 1954. Thought of the Month, Crossroads of Civilization by the Imperator AMORC. This article is the 7th of a series being written by the Imperator after his return from a world journey in behalf of the Rosicrucian Order. Editor. In the majority of the capitals of Europe, there is to be had a tremendous contrast between the old and new. Symbols of centuries vie with each other for attention. One may but step across a boulevard teeming with traffic to find himself in a winding alley-like street of the 16th century. These houses of yesteryear, with their narrow gabled roofs and drooping dormer windows, give the appearance of an aged person wearied by the pace of life about him. One gazes at the structures and at the pavement of cobblestone at his feet, and momentarily tries to capture something of the spirit of their times. The wooden shutters of the upper stories are open. A pale yellow light may be seen radiating from their depths. They are occupied today. Are the inhabitants intrigued by their surroundings? Can they imagine the views of the world held by the former residents? Are they impressed by the tremendous march of events since the days when the original occupants trod the now worn oak floors and climbed the same steep, poorly lighted stairs? There is a certain thrill in being able to move one's consciousness from the past, which these dwellings represent, to the present era by a simple gesture, and merely turning about and walking in the opposite direction. For just ahead, and but a few steps away, lies today, the 20th century. To most persons, the word Africa conjures visions of savagery and primitive life. To them, it is a world as yet untouched or unscathed, depending on one's concepts of the developments of the present era. Actually, the traveler to South Africa, to the Transvaal in particular, finds a contrast fully as striking as that offered by the metropolitans of Europe. There is the primitive culture whose tempo and objectives have defied the vision and will of modern man. Sharply defined against such a backdrop is every progress which is attributed to civilization. There is no more effective example of this contrast than the large city of Johannesburg. It is affectionately called by some of its citizenry the New York of Africa, to depict its similarity to the mode of architecture common to that American city. The visitor finds it difficult to believe that this city of towering skyscrapers, blocks of massive stone and concrete buildings, and ultra-fashionable shops is but a little over 60 years old. It is a monument to this age, begun in the 19th century and built in what at that time was generally a savage subcontinent. As one stands gazing from his hotel window, the principal industry of Johannesburg and of the country is evident to him. All about the perimeter of the city may be seen what appears as the foothills of some mountain range. Actually, the city is located on a plateau at an altitude of slightly over 5,000 feet. These hills are unattractive and at a distance are gray, drab, and without any vestige of growth. They accentuate the architectural beauty of the buildings and the modernity of the streets crowded with American and British automobiles. These foothills, one soon learns, are man-made. They are mine dumps. The world's richest gold fields lie in the Witwater Strand, the ridge of the White Waters. The main reef discovered in 1886 extends for almost 60 miles. Johannesburg is situated on this gold-bearing rock. Its very foundation is gold. Shafts among this reef have penetrated to a depth of 10,000 feet, where mining is effectively carried on. The mining industry in South Africa employs more than 330,000 persons, 40,000 Europeans and 290,000 non-Europeans. 40-odd companies recovered 11.5 million ounces of gold from over 57 million tons of rock milled. The annual value of this production is well over $435 million or 144 million pounds. In the process, the waste material is piled high to form huge dumps. These have not added to the aesthetic quality of Johannesburg. The mining and civil authorities are very conscious of this deplorable situation and for years have sought a way to profitably make use of these huge mounds of crushed rock. At one time, they were to be used for highway construction. The chemical ingredients in the waste material which were used in the process of extracting the gold were found to be harmful for such constructive purposes. The same cause prevented the planting of vegetation on a satisfactory scale to beautify the dumps. Any attempt to refine the waste material would have been too costly. The armament race, particularly the building of atom weapons, brought about an amazing discovery. The United States and the British Commonwealth were most anxious to locate new sources of uranium or fissionable material for their atom weapons. An analysis revealed that the waste dumps had a high content of radioactive ore or uranium. This provides a new source of wealth to the already prosperous Union of South Africa. It indicates that waste is relative only to need and demand. Industrial impact. The gold mining industry exports to the United States in excess of $100 million in gold bullion annually. After coming from the deep mines of the Rad, the United States of America again buries the gold at Fort Knox in its subterranean treasury vault. This provides South Africa with one of the largest dollar incomes of any British Commonwealth nation. As a consequence, a large portion of this is used for the importation of American products, including motor cars. The interest shown in American goods, customs, and fashions has created a strong bond of goodwill between the two nations. The gold mining industry of South Africa pays tribute to the enterprise of American mining engineers who played a prominent part of its early development. The mines are worked by native labor. The company provides for the housing of these workers. The recruited laborers are drawn from native territories inside the Union of South Africa, as Lesotholand, Swaziland, and the Bechuanaland Protectorate. Also from border areas, Mozambique and the Rhodesias. A journey to these living quarters or compounds is an entertaining as well as an instructive experience. Traveling along a well-paved highway, we approached what at first seemed a walled and fenced military reserve. Long, low-grade buildings confronted us. They were quite utilitarian in appearance, there being no attempt to ornament them or to conform to any architectural style. After military scrutiny, our party was interrogated by native police as to our purpose for entering the compound. These native police are organized by the mining company for the enforcement or regulations mutually established by themselves and the civil authorities. The particular compound visited by us was in the form of a quadrangle, the various buildings surrounding an open area. These structures consisted of dormitories for the natives arranged in barrack style. They were simple, immaculate, and orderly. Most of the natives, or Bantu, as they are collectively called, are quite primitive and retain many of their customs and rites. They wear amulets, indulge in magical rites, which, of course, are discouraged and in tribal ceremonies. Peering into the kitchens, we found them preparing meals for their fellow workers. They are prohibited, however, from a diet such as they are accustomed to in their tribal homes. Government inspections insist as well on sanitary measures, for the spread of an epidemic among these thousands of natives would jeopardize the welfare of the other races in the nearby cities. In addition, we were advised that dietitians prepared special foods which is necessary for them to have in order to undergo the hard labor in the wet, the cold, and artificial light of the mines. The mining companies engaged this native labor for periods up to 3 years. The men lived in these compounds away from their families. This in itself constitutes a social and psychological problem, which is quite delicate but has apparently not caused any serious disturbance. These men are not permitted to live outside the compound. This prevents a pouring into the city of thousands of natives with wholly primitive desires and little restraint as measured by modern standards. They are permitted to visit the community periodically. Being disciplined by police of their own race removes much of the psychological provocation of resentment towards their necessary restriction. Notwithstanding the precautions, violence occasionally occurs. Thousands of men living together away from women and children for several years engenders social and psychological problems. Such problems are not related to the race, but the circumstances of their life. Transportation to and from the native territories to the compound is paid by the mining companies. The pay in actual money is quite small if measured by the scale of pay, for example to American miners. However, it is far more than such natives could acquire elsewhere. Further, they receive good food and the best of health care. They are by no means slave labor, but admittedly, do provide the companies with a vast reservoir of cheap labor which is profitable to the industry. The native workers accumulate their pay until it reaches a sizable amount. This they bring back to their homes, principally in the form of imported European products, which in turn have an environmental effect upon the other members of their tribe. Native entertainment. This was a Sunday. Natives from the different tribal areas loitered about the compound, enjoying the blue sky and brilliant sunshine as a respite from the depths of the earth where they labored daily. As we passed them, they gazed at us curiously, as we did at them. Their attire was a fascinating admixture of European work clothes and headpieces and articles of native origin. Though the men were from different tribal areas, they had a common dialect in which they cheerfully conversated. We entered an amphitheater-like structure, more like a small sports stadium. An air of expectancy prevailed. Onto the stone step-like seats of the structure surrounding the earthen oval, spectators, mostly European or whites, were crowding. Every Sunday, intertribal dances are performed by the native workers in this compound. The unpaved ground of the oval on which these dancers were to perform was of a reddish clay. Even though it had been moistened, those who walked across it set up a fine spray of dust which lightly covered those seats nearby. Opposite us across the oval, in the section apparently assigned to them, native spectators and workmen at leisure were filling in. Those already seated began a chanting and a drumming of their feet, which had an appealing and exciting rhyme. Suddenly, from the side into the center of the oval or arena, ran a native who functioned in the manner of a master of ceremonies. He announced that the first dance group, which was to be performed, would be by the Nguni group. Some of these dancers simulated their native customs by using scrap materials found in the compound. Others wore a clean version of their daily work clothes. The dancing of this group was characterized by a stomping action. They likewise used sticks which were clapped together to very effectively resemble a musical instrument. It was very obvious that the dancers enjoyed this display of their tribal dance as much as did the spectators. The Zulu group, the second on the extensive program, were the most impressive. Their correct dress includes the use of skins, particularly a calf skin apron, and tufts of Angora goat skin. They carried sticks and small dance shields. The music was provided by their own number and consisted of singing and clapping. The dance leader began the dance by the stamping of his feet after preliminary songs. The enthusiasm of the dancers produced a kind of ecstasy. They stared out across the amphitheater. One wondered if, in consciousness, their selves were not projected far beyond the confines of this compound and the dismal depths of the mines. Were they again, if but for the moment, out once more in the brush, perhaps before the campfire with their bandas to their backs, and their families swaying and chanting a response to their stamping feet? An honored visitor. As the time wore on, I was moved to frequent reveries by the primitive rhyme of the music and the gyrations of dancers' bodies. Suddenly I was informed by the secretary of the Rosicrucian chapter of Johannesburg, who accompanied us, that I was to be honored upon this occasion. Performing in the center of the arena were lithe, tall dancers. They were attired in their tribal costumes of skins draped across one shoulder and falling down back and front to about knee level. Their hair was plastered down with some greasy substance, and colored metal bangles glistened on their wrist or snugly clung to their muscular upper arms. One leaped forth in a cloud of dust to the beat of the drums. Before him he had a shield of dried leathery skin, stretched taut by thongs across the skeletal framework. To this was attached a knob carry. This latter is a stick, one end of which is fashioned into a large knob about the size of a man's fist. This is used in ceremonial dances, but also as a war club in combat. In his other hand he brandished an assegai, or short spear. He alternated in his movements between a crouch-like position, bending his head almost to the point between his knees, and then leaping suddenly in the air, simultaneously thrusting his spear skyward. This would be followed by a series of short steps backward, with the shield held before him in a protective manner. His actions depicted combat, the advance, and then the defensive retreat. This imitative series comprising the elements of the dance. All movements were accompanied by chanting, a repetition of 3 or 4 low and high-pitched notes in time with the stamping of the feet, the clapping of hands, and the drums. I was requested to enter the arena, which I did. I stood waiting. The dancer approached. The stomping of the feet grew louder. After each retreat, the dancer would advance closer and closer. Suddenly, one leap brought him within a assegai length of me, extending before him the sharp spear and shield. He danced about me. I was to accept these. They were mementos of the occasion. But just when should I accept them? Should I extend my hand or should I wait? I decided upon the latter course. The tempo of the stamping now almost reached frenzied heights. I scrutinized the face of the young man, for he must be only in his early 20s. His features were sharp and well-defined, his eyes large and clear. Though he was very dark of skin, he had few of the usual facial characteristics of his race. His face was, as well, exceptionally intelligent. Beads of perspiration ran down his forehead. His arms and legs glistened in the hot sun where the skin was free from the red dust. With a loud crash, like the cymbals in a symphonic orchestra, the clapping of the sticks and stomping suddenly ceased. The tribesman stood motionless before me with shield and spear proffered. He was almost rigid. That was my cue. I took them and bowed as gracefully as possible. He stood staring at me, scanning my face in a friendly way. It was a moment not to be forgotten. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.